You know, eye appeal is one of those things that I'm beginning to think is a totally made up, completely arbitrary statement that big Pokemon and big card grading decided I needed to care about because apparently it's going to impact the way that my cards are valued in the future. But seriously, I've seen some cards sell for a crap ton of money because they have really good eye appeal. And so, in today's video, we learn more about eye appeal and why it's important. But first, as always, roll that intro. Hey Gengar Gang, what is going on? My name is Ryan, this is the Analytic Gengar, and welcome to another video. In today's video, we go over eye appeal and value, understanding what eye appeal is, how it impacts value, and how it applies specifically to the Pokemon trading card game. Now, today's article, as usual, is based off, today's video is based off an article, LOL, I can't speak, and this one comes to us from cardlines.com. So, of course, as usual, assuming I remember to do so, you will have a link down below, and if there isn't, feel free to reach out and I'll get you the link anyway. But without further ado, let's get into it and finally get a good understanding of what eye appeal is, and again, why it's important for when you're grading trading cards. So, here we go. The article starts off by giving a little bit of an abstract. The phrase eye appeal gets thrown around a lot, more than the Chiefs throw football. Yeesh, cardlines.com. Someone has a little bit of a prediction for the 2021-2022 season. I don't know. We'll certainly see how well they do with passing yardage. Anyways, the article goes on to say that no one can really nail down exactly what it is or what it means. And more importantly, there is a relationship that could be extrapolated between the eye appeal of an individual trading card and the value that is derived from it. So, the first major section of the article looks to define eye appeal. And I actually kind of like the definition right here. Eye appeal for the article sports cards, but just in general for trading cards, refers to the look of a card and how that look influences its value. Is the card really well preserved? Is the card fully retaining its color? Has it been bleached by sun exposure? Has it four very sharp, clean-cut corners? Or are there other items that might be detracting from the overall value? One of the things that is really interesting is that although there are certain cards that have a defect that technically make them one grade, the eye appeal of the card may indicate that the grade is a lot higher. So, you might have a situation play out where because a card has a scratch on the holo, it is immediately going to grade a PSA 6. However, aside from that scratch, there are many factors that would indicate this card would have gotten a higher grade had it not had that big scratch on the holo, and stuff like that is pretty common. So, eye appeal is most often used to describe attractive looking cards that are not in a high graded slab. So, an example, it's a raw card that looks like it should grade well, or even a low card that's going to fetch more money than an identically graded card because they look better overall. In short, eye appeal is just how the card looks, and it really is just that straightforward. The article hits it right on the nose. It's just how a card looks. And as you can see, they list a few of the things that I mention and some things that I don't. There's really no concrete definition, so that's the first thing to really take away from this article and this video. If you're looking for a real definition for eye appeal, you won't get one. Instead, what you're going to hear is that it really is just how the individual observes the card and how they would objectively value it. If it looks really good, it's going to value itself really highly, and even if it's in, a PSA 6 slab, it may sell for the price of a 7 or even an 8 because it looks so good. So it's not one of those uncommon situations that you see play out on eBay. You see very frequently people say it's a strong 6 or a strong 9 or some number like that. And one of the main reasons for this is because, some of these cards, they look really good, and that added eye appeal is sometimes what causes the price to bump up a little bit. Now, the next section of this article plays into the role of EyeAppeal in grading. So one of the things that the article notes is that EyeAppeal is incredibly subjective, and PSA is one of the biggest contributors to the idea and the widespread use of the term EyeAppeal, since EyeAppeal is actually almost literally used word for word in their grading standards. So the article hyperlinks to a explanation on their website where Joe Orlando, former president of PSA, goes on a little bit of a philosophical debate on the inherent subjectivity of EyeAppeal. One thing that the PSA article notes that is cited in this particular article is that there are really two ways that EyeAppeal can play a role in the grade of a card and its overall value. The first thing it can do is actually move the grade upwards. So because it has superior EyeAppeal, a card that is technically a PSA 8 may grade a 9. And that may be because as long as the centering is correct and the scratches are not there, if the card has enough EyeAppeal, it could move up a technical grade. The other thing is that if it has superior EyeAppeal, even if it does end up grading as a PSA 8, it can be quote-unquote a strong 8, and that can act as a premium that sort of drives the value of the card up. So even though it's not a PSA 9, it may sell for a price very close to a PSA 9. Now, PWCC is also cited in this article, and they go ahead and say that cards with superior EyeAppeal have sold for 165% of market value. Now, that is probably a quote of data, so obviously nothing that we can really look at or consume, but I'm certainly willing to say that anecdotally, I have observed something similar. I've always noticed that, especially on those PWCC larger auction blocks, when they have multiple copies of the same card, it's usually the copies with nice holographic patterns or swirls or really nice centering. Even when it's the same exact grade, there's always a card that sells for a little bit more and not the exact same amount, and that is because a lot of these bigger players, when they're bidding for these cards, really do look at the EyeAppeal of the card, and they'll bid on the card that they think subjectively looks better. What you find is that more people tend to agree with each other than disagree with each other, which is why sometimes you'll see some pretty hilarious price discrepancies between two cards that graded the exact same, and yet one card carried a premium while the other one did not. So next up, the article goes on to break down two different scenarios that play out for EyeAppeal and value. You can have good-looking cards with low grades or really bad-looking cards with high grades. So for the beautiful cards with low grade section, they mention the example that I actually walked through a little earlier, where something that technically grades a 4 because it has a crease or because it meets the literal definition of the grading standard, but everything else looks like it would have graded a PSA 8. These are the types of cards that often sell for a little bit higher than you would expect. A little fun fact, something that I have observed, and again, more anecdotal evidence than anything else, is that these are the types of cards that often frequently set new highs when it comes to sale prices. So whenever there's going to be a bit of growth in the Pokemon economy, what I've noticed is that these cards with significant EyeAppeal are usually the ones that sort of break open the market and pop up with some new record-setting price. Everyone starts paying attention, and because this, PSA 5 or 6, let's just say, sold for a new record-breaking price, people list their 7, 8s, 9s, and 10s, assuming they'll get more money, and it actually ends up working out that way. So that's one of the little market indicators I've kind of seen that kind of signals a growth or expansion period within the hobby as well. Now, as it comes to ugly cards with high grades, this is typically most seen with qualifiers. So typically you'll see this with off-center cards, and you can see ones featured on screen right now. Basically a card that otherwise would have graded a 9 or a 10, but it's just so busted when it comes to the centering that it simply cannot grade that, and they add the qualifier to the grade as a result. Now, one of the things I will note is that our hobby can behave atypically. There was a 1981 Fleer Wilt Chamberlain that sold as a PSA 9 off-center for $17,500 versus regular PSA 9s of the card selling for typically $40,000, which is a pretty significant difference. Our hobby behaves a little bit differently in that occasionally people come to value those off-center or those other qualifier cards, and part of the reason for that is because they can frequently be very low population and therefore can be a significant type of grade that makes it a very unique niche type of collectible. What I've also noticed is that PSA no longer gives these off-center grades out willy-nilly. If it looks like a PSA 8, it's going to grade as a PSA 8. And that's one of the most important things to remember about cards that grade high but have low eye appeal. Part of the reason for that is because most times if this card is just a bad looking card, it'll grade within the technical grade. So if there's a crease on a card, they're not going to bump it up to a PSA 9 because it has really good eye appeal. It's going to go down to a PSA 4. And similarly, unless you're playing with something like centering, which can get the qualifier, you really shouldn't expect to see, something with busted corners or really ugly, damaged surface have a very high grade. So almost always when you see an ugly card with a high grade, it's going to be because it was severely off center and it got the qualifier, which again, as I've previously stated, is becoming more and more rare. Finally but not least, there is the other types of eye appeal and value. So within this article, they go over two interesting tidbits. The first is the LeBron Prism card. It's known as the Kobe Tribute Dunk. It's basically him doing Kobe Bryant's signature dunk, and this was a 2020-2021 Prism card. So obviously with the unfortunate timely passing of Kobe Bryant in that accident in early 2020, this card sort of instantly became a hit. So similarly, we have many cards like this in our hobby. Now, they're not Kobe Bryant tributes, but they can be promo cards, they can be special delivery Pikachus, and they can be other types of limited release cards that have really cool artwork that means something or signifies something, and that becomes part of the reason why they instantaneously have high eye appeal. A good example of this are the Legend cards, which, although tacky when they were released, actually have kind of become fan favorites amongst a small group of people, because it's really cool that you get to put two cards together and put together a little story. And there are many other cards that have become very prized and valued for their artwork. I'm looking at you, Weedle, from the most recent Pokemon card sets. Again, super cool, super funny cards, and they have a certain amount of eye appeal to them. Not saying they're going to be the next $1 million card, but pretty fun to kind of consider how interesting it is that people are beginning to place a little bit more value on the artwork within our trading card game. Another good example of eye appeal made within this article and in the context of sports cards is parallel cards. So, the example they give is that if you have a parallel that looks better because it matches with the team jersey and uniform, then there's a stronger chance that this card has really good eye appeal. So basically, a blue parallel for a player who wears blue is going to look really good and is therefore going to have a higher premium. Similarly, if there are matching colors, so if you're looking at a Lakers card that has a yellowish tint to the parallel, well, yeah, it's going to look good because those are their team colors, therefore the card should technically sell for more. Unsurprisingly, we have a similar thing in our hobby as well, and that is realistically swirls. So although parallels are one of those things that are kind of random, to my understanding, in the way that they are created for any given trading card based on the foiling on the sheet. Similarly, we have that issue with swirls. So swirls are one of those things that were randomly placed into the holographic foil for many of the vintage sets. And basically what ended up happening is, based on how the card was sort of lined up and printed, you had a chance at no swirl, part of a swirl, one swirl, or two swirls if you were really, really lucky. And some of the best cards to get two swirls on are probably going to be the vintage reverse hollow energies that you could get from the EX era, because they had such a large surface of hollow foil, there was a really good chance that you were going to get two swirls, one on the top of the card and one on the bottom of the card. Then within the whole swirl game, there's the question of where the swirl sits. So just as an example, I've seen Gold Star Rayquazas that have swirls by the tail, I've seen them that have them by the mouth, and I've seen them with no swirls at all. Now, whenever you see one with a swirl near the tail or the mouth, it's almost always noted as such. Interestingly enough, I had a Flygon that had a swirl near its butt, so I posted that on Instagram because this is what your lower tier Instagrammers have to do in order to get a laugh nowadays. Anyways, swirls are cool because they mimic this whole parallel story, and basically they add a little bit of flavor to the card that isn't there previously, nor is it guaranteed. Every holographic card is going to be holographic, unless it's an error card, but not every card is guaranteed a swirl, and the placement of that swirl, which again is totally random, can really help drive an interesting amount of eye appeal to the card that again can help it take on some additional value. So the article goes on to wrap up by saying, should we take EyeAppeal into account? And yes. Now, the fair warning that I totally agree with is that you shouldn't be flipping cards solely based on EyeAppeal. Instead, if you're looking to build your own collection, or if you're really kind of designing something and you, as a collector, have preferences in looks, designs, etc., make sure to go out of your way to take EyeAppeal into account. And in situations where you really want to make sure that the market value of this card is the best it can possibly be, again, go out of your way to maximize EyeAppeal, fully knowing that it will likely do you many favors in the future. But with all that said, friends, thanks again for checking out another video. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did learn anything new about the PSA grading standards or EyeAppeal or how it plays a role in value, feel free to leave a like down below on the video. And if you're not already, feel free to join the Gengar Gang in order to join our happy little community. Other than that, friends, let me know if you have any questions down below. I'll be somewhere in the comments lurking, waiting to answer any questions. And other than that, I hope you guys are having an amazing day, and we will talk soon. Peace.